the best way to understand the Kav HaTa'arich, the date line debate between the Achronim, the Chazon Ish, and Rav Tukachinsky is by taking a look at the source piece of Talmud in Rosh Hashana Chaf Amud Bet 20b. I have here on page 1 from the Cincino translation. Let's take a look. There's two specific rules upon which the date line discussion is based. Rule number 1 is Rabbi Zera. Take a look at the top paragraph. When Rabbi Zera went up to Palestine, he sent back word to them in Babylon. It is necessary that there should be on the new moon a night and a day of the new moon. Now in the Hebrew, if you want to take a look at the actual Gemara text in Hebrew, that's on page 4. Amar Rabbi Zera Shalach Lahu. Yeah. Rabbi Zera Shalach Lahu. Tzarich Shehei Laila V'Yom Min HaChodesh. It is required by law that there be a night followed by a day from the new month. Now, at the moment we don't know what that statement means, but there is such a rule that Rabbi Zera made this rule, and that is, it is necessary, there must be on the new moon a night and a day of the new moon. Now we're going to see that there is an argument between Rashi and Rav Zerachia Halevi, known as the Razo, also very well known as the Baal Hamor, in terms of meaning what this rule is. And then comes the second rule. This is what Abba, the father of Rav Simlai, meant. We calculate according to the new moon's birth. If it is born before midday, then certainly it will have been seen shortly before sunset. If it was not born before midway, certainly it will not have been seen shortly before sunset. So we have these two rules in the Talmud Rosh Hashana. Cryptic rules, at least at the moment, until we have some commentator that's going to walk us through these two rules. So rule number 1 is that there has to be a night and a day of the new moon. And the second rule is that if it, meaning the new moon, is born before midday, then it will be seen before sunset. And if it's not born before midday, it will not have been seen before sunset. And again, let's take a look in the original Hebrew. Nolad Kodem, taking a look at page 4. Nolad Kodem Chatzot. If the new moon happens before midday, Bi'adua Shenira Samuch L'Shkiat Hachama, then absolutely is certain that it will seem before the sun goes down. Lo Nolad Kodem Chatzot. And if the molid is not before midday, Bi'adua Shlo Nira Samuch L'Shkiat Hachama, then it is certain that it's not going to be seen close to the sunset. Now, if we take a look back to page 1 at the very bottom, you could take a look at the notes that Cincino has, but take a look at my note at the very bottom. Note, Rashi sees these rules as independent of each other. The Baal Hamor, Rav Zerachia Halevi, the Razah, sees these rules as dependent upon each other. See next page for the elaboration. So let's turn to page 2. Now let's just take it through my notes and I'll explain it as I go through. Elaboration of the rules of Rav Zera and Abba, father of Rav Simlai, Rosh Hashana 20b, according to Rashi and according to the Baal Hamor. And by the way, I'm going to be using interchangeably Rav Zerachia Halevi, the Razo, the Baal Hamor. In fact, I will mainly be saying the Baal Hamor. And as I've noted on the board over here, both of these figures, Rashi and the Baal Hamor, are known as Rishonim, classics. The Baal Hamor was from the 12th century. Rashi was from the 11th century. we're going to be introduced to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, who wrote the Kuzari from the 11th and 12th centuries. We're also going to spend a moment or two on the Mishnah Torah, Laws of Kiddush HaChodesh, which was written by Maimonides, Rambam, also a 12th century sage. So by virtue of the fact that they're from these early centuries of about 700 years ago, we're talking about Rishonim. Okay, that's going to be opposed to the modern day poskim. We're going to be talking primarily about the Chazon Ish, Rabbi Avram Yeshaya Karelitz, and also Rabbi Yechiel Michal Tukachinsky. Both of them dealt with problems in the 20th century. Now, back to this sheet. Rule number 1. It is necessary that there should be a night and a day of the new moon. That's Reb Zera's rule. Number 2, we calculate the new moon's birth, the molid, that's the first appearance, that's the first illumination of the moon in the month. If before midday, chatzot in Yerushalayim, that's what it's talking about, the molid, we're talking about midday in Yerushalayim, it will certainly be seen before sunset. If after chatzot, now the question is sunset where? Okay, so we'll get around to that. If after chatzot, and if it's after midday in Yerushalayim, it will certainly not be seen before, I wrote sunset, okay, before sunset. Okay, change the B to an N, and I think that's all you need to do to that word. First, let's take Rashi's interpretation. Interpretation of rule number 1. If let's state the rule again. It is necessary that there should be a night and a day of the new moon. Okay, what does that mean? Interpretation of rule number 1. If the old moon, in other words, the very last illumination of the previous month, the last waning crescent of the previous month, is seen after sunset on the day of 29/30, in other words, day 29 of the month, going into the 30th, it's that night, and you know that from one moled to another moled is approximately 29 and a half days. So if the old moon is seen after sunset on the night of day 29 going into 30, it is impossible to sight the moled on day 30. And it's forbidden to proclaim day 30 as Rosh Chodesh. Since from moled to moled, from new moon to new moon, is 29 and a half days, so you have 29 full days, and then you have the next half of the day, which is the 30th day. So the prime day, the prime days for the witnesses to be able to see the new moon is day 30 and day 31. Because 29 for sure is going to be part of the old month. So the question is, if the witnesses see the new moon on day 30, then day 30 is Rosh Chodesh, is the first day of the next month. If they don't see it on day 30, then we presume they will see it on 31, but we don't even have to go that far. We know that day 31 will be the Rosh Chodesh, and that the previous month had 30 days, and Rosh Chodesh starts on the quote-unquote day 31. So the issue here is when is the day 30 of the previous month, when is that ra'ui? When is it worthy to be, if you want to call it, proclaimable? A day where the Sanhedrin in Yerushalayim is able to proclaim it the first day of the next month. So if the old moon, now this is Rashi's explanation, if the old moon is seen after sunset at the end of the 29th day, after it's nighttime already, in other words, it's the night of the 30th day, and you still see the waning crescent of the old month, it is forbidden to proclaim the 30th day as Rosh Chodesh. The 30th day is no longer ra'ui. It is not proclaimable. It also means that the court does not, well, this is just a side law, but I'll throw it in because Rashi does say it. It also means that the court does not intimidate the witnesses to stop them from looking for the moled. There are sometimes, and for reasons that we're not going to go into at this point, the court intimidates the witnesses to hinder them from making a sighting. But in this case, since it is obvious that the moled will not be seen on the 30th day because you still saw the waning crescent and the night of the night of the 29th going into the 30th, so it's obvious that there's not going to be a moled on the 30th day. There's no reason to intimidate the witnesses into not going for a sighting because they're not going to see anything. And the 30th day cannot possibly be Rosh Chodesh. Now this is Rashi's explanation of Reb Zera. So when he says there needs to be a night and a day of the new month, Rashi says that just means is that if you see the final crescent of the last month in the nighttime of the 29th going into the 30th, then rest assured the 30th day, that next day, is not ra'ui, is not worthy to be ever proclaimed the first of Chodesh because you're not going to see a new moon. Okay, that's Rashi's interpretation of the first rule. Now Rashi's interpretation of the second rule. The second rule is we calculate the new moon's birth, the moled, if before midday, Chatzot in Yerushalayim, it's calculated to happen, it will certainly be seen before sunset. If after Chatzot, it will certainly not be seen before sunset. Okay, first of all, you have to know the difference between what is called the astronomical moled and the visible moled. The astronomical moled is at a time where the moon is completely and totally dark. It's right between the earth and the sun is shining on the other side of the moon, and we can't see anything. And this is based upon a calculation, the calculations that the sages of old had. That's called the astronomical or the calculated moled. The calculated moled, the astronomical moled, cannot be seen. You cannot see any crescent. It only becomes visible depending on where you are on Earth. And by the way, I hope you realize is that the moled is a one-time event Earth-wide. You don't keep having a moled over and over again through the course of a day. The moled happens. It happens one time every month, no matter where you live in the world. At least in Israel, it was understood by the sages that the sighting of the first ability to sight the moled is 6 hours after the astronomical moled is the visible moled. Okay, so just know the difference between the astronomical moled, it's when it's calculated, versus the visible moled when it can be seen by a witness. And in Israel, that's generally 6 hours after the astronomical moled. Okay, so back to the interpretation. Interpretation of rule number 2 according to Rashi. If the Jerusalem court calculates the astronomical moled to occur before Chatzot of Yerushalayim, meaning midday in Jerusalem on day 30, the visible moled will certainly be visible over Jerusalem before sunset on day 30. Any witness claiming to have seen the moled under these circumstances is believed, and day 30 is proclaimed Rosh Chodesh. So if internally in the Sanhedrin they did their calculations and they concluded that the astronomical moled was going to take place before midday in Jerusalem, then the court stays open and they're waiting for somebody to say, when is Rosh Chodesh? When did they see the sighting? And if witnesses come in and they say, we saw the crescent coming down in the west towards sunset. We saw the sun go down, and just after the sun go down, we saw the crescent. that's a viable statement. It's a credible statement. And the court will accept the statement, and they will pronounce that the 30th day is Rosh Chodesh, is the beginning of is the first day of the next month. That's because the molad was calculated astronomically to take place before midday of Jerusalem. Therefore, the 30th day became ra'ui, it became worthy, it became proclaimable. And once the witnesses say that they saw it, we accept it, and it's the new month. However, if the Jerusalem court calculates the astronomical molad to occur after Chatzot of Yerushalayim on day 30, the visible molad cannot be visible over Jerusalem before sunset on day 30. Any witness claiming to have seen the molad before sunset on day 30 under these circumstances is a liar. So internally, the Sanhedrin calculates that the astronomical molad took place after midday in Jerusalem. Therefore, they've all decided, all these Chachamim have decided among themselves that you can't see the moon before the end of this day. Should any witnesses show up and say, we saw the crescent new moon right about sunset on day 30, the court will just dismiss them as liars. And day 31 is automatically Rosh Chodesh. So this is Rashi's interpretation of these rules. And based upon Rashi's interpretation, first of all, neither of these rules have anything to do with setting some type of dateline. These rules, each one is independent of the other one, and all they tell you is when the molad will be visible or won't be visible. If you see the old crescent on the night of the 29th going to 30th, you're not going to see a molad on day 30, and the day 30 is not ra'ui. It's not. It can't become Rosh Chodesh. Similarly, if they calculate the molad to occur after Chatzot in Yerushalayim on day 30, that day is not ra'ui. If they calculate it before Chatzot, then that day is ra'ui. If you don't see a waning crescent on the night of 29 going to 30, then the 30th is ra'ui. So according to Rashi, these two rules are independent of each other, and both of these rules are indicators of whether the 30th day after the last molad, or the 30th day of the month, is considered a day worthy to be Rosh Chodesh. That's Rashi's interpretation. So you see that based upon Rashi's interpretation, this Gemara in Rosh Hashana, Kofim Beis, nothing could be derived from it concerning what would make any type of global dateline, Kavat Harich. But now if you come take a look at the bottom of page 2, comes Rav Zerachi Halevi, known as the Balamor, and he has a completely different interpretation of these two rules.